I've done a couple lives in the last 2 days. I think I've been stumbling over my words, to be honest, because I am so overwhelmed by the emotions choking my throat chakra. I am overwhelmed at the pettiness. So the vice president made a comment about the fact, no, just to remind you, he's married to Indian woman and has brown babies. You want to call them beige babies, it's fine. And being Indian, she speaks another language, maybe even 3, possibly 4. So he made a comment, the vice president, that people don't want to be around people that you don't have anything in common with. And again, as an elder, I'm going to bring up my father, who is multiracial, African American, Blackfoot Indian, German, Jewish. Okay? And he lived in the ghettos of Trenton, New Jersey, born in 1923. And the ghetto meant poor people who were Polish, Italian. By the way, my father knew Italian because his neighbors were Italian. The people next door were Irish, Italian, Jewish, from various parts of Europe, Persian, Moroccan. Shall I go on? The ghetto in those days in New Jersey meant you were poor. And it was not a segregated ghetto, okay, at all. It was the melting pot of people who had come here, or people who had been enslaved here, or people who had the bloodlines of the Native Americans who had ran through these incredible mountains and had been the caretakers of this land. And the intermixing of these bloodlines had occurred and was continuously occurring. Okay? And so for J.D. Vance to say that we only want to be sitting, I only want my neighbors to speak one language, and that language would be English, American English, is levels of racism I can't even wrap my head around. I've never heard such shit in my life. Bear in mind, he's married to this woman, who, by the way, if you see a picture of her in January of this year, her skin is golden, it's beautiful, she's glowing. Look up Usha today. She looks gray, she looks drained, her skin is lackluster, she looks frazzled, she looks like she's gone through levels of cortisol crashes that are unhinged. The abuse is real. And abuse comes from multiple levels, psychological abuse and so forth. Look up, I just actually reposted this comment. And Mandami was asked about that. Now, I'm going to educate you guys a little bit. In Europe, right? I'm just going to bring up Europe. In Europe, the average person knows 3 languages. They know their mother tongue. It doesn't matter what it is. German, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. They will typically know that. They will know English, and then they'll know a neighboring country's language. It could be French, could be German, could be Italian, whatever, right? So the typical European person knows 3 languages. The typical European person is constantly going on a train, on a ride, to literally waving their passport and moving out of their cultural whatever comfort zone, if you will, and moving into Switzerland or Spain, and literally within, say, 2 hours to 6 hours, they're in the country where the language is different, the food is different, the clothes are different, everything's different. And it's the joy of being a European. It's actually the fun of it. I have memories of my father and my mother and us all, coming, getting into the car at around 10 a.m. in the morning in south of France. We lived in the south of France, and going to Italy for lunch. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you this. The average person who are Persians or I'm going to just talk about Persians because that's my experience with Persians. The average person I've met knows, if not 3 to 7 languages. And so this idea that we're going to start teaching Americans that they should not know more than one language, that people just want to have their neighbors to be exactly like them. I don't know about you, but I don't want cookie cutter images of me. The very thing that our diversity is our power. Our diversity is incredible. I'm going to tell you something. I lived in South Pasadena, California, and I moved there in 1996. And it was pretty much homogenized, okay? And you know what I'm saying by that, okay? And the minute a gay couple moved in, we were so excited, me and my husband, because we're like, oh my God, thank God. You know what I mean? Something coming in that's going to bring us color and a different point of view. And then more people started coming in, African-American people, gay people, Asian people, and it became a better neighborhood, a better little town. It got improved from the if you will, blood transfusion, the DNA, the cultural infusion of different people. And this is the most important thing I think people need to understand, is that your diversity is your power. And what I love about Yeshua, and this is Yeshua, and it's almost like, why? Why would anyone call themselves a Christian and then look down on people who are different than them when Yeshua was Semitic, he was Palestinian, he had Arabic blood? That's what Semitic means. Semitic is Arab blood. And that truth really isn't being understood, because how can you be anti the very thing you pray to? I don't know. I'm not going to stay on this live very long, because really it's like talking to a wall, because in a sense, I think most people don't understand that this very country was built on something that was multi-generational but multi-racial, and the mixtures of the bloodlines were part of the magic. And the sad part is that people had to pass. In Hollywood, most of these incredibly beautiful actresses were Mexican passing as white, and they were doing it because they were told to do it. They were changing their names so that they would be accepted. Raquel Welch was a Mexican woman, Hispanic woman, Raquel Welch. So I think it's time for us to stop and push back, and embrace our diversity and love it, and literally support it, and demand it. Demand diversity. Demand that your neighbors are different than you. I lived in Sacramento, and in my neighborhood, I would go on my walk with my dog, and I would see Sikhs, men with these beautiful turbans, on their bicycle, in prayer, in the park. I loved seeing that. Loved it. And if you can't relate to this, if you can't relate to this in your own self because you've never lived like that, you've always lived in a homogenized city, town, village, suburban area, I don't know what to tell you. Because even when I lived in Pacific Palisades, right? And when I say even, I'm talking about the 1970s. In Pacific, one of the richest places in California. Things really have changed in this country, I have to admit. But anyway, during that time, there was a girl from Hong Kong in my class. There was a Hindu girl in my class. There were various, people with various racial backgrounds and cultural backgrounds in my class. And that was the beauty. And it brought a point of view that was gorgeous. And I really got to enjoy that even more when I was in Hong Kong in the International Lutheran School. It was called the Hong Kong International School. I believe it was Repulse Bay. Anyway, I went to school there, 14 years old, and the interracial dating was completely normalized, as it should be. All the the various races. So we had army brats and diplomat kids is what we had. So we had a good mix of different economic status. And there were never any issues with race. We had biracial Asian, what they call Eurasian children. We had biracial children. And there was no issue. I swear to God, we never had a racist attack on anyone ever. You could call it the Tower of Babylon before Babylon fell, meaning everyone knew 2 to 3 languages. It was the best school I've ever I still have such I'm such in gratitude over that memory of that time I lived in Hong Kong. And I got to see the culture of Chinese people, Cantonese people. I met, and I understood the difference between Cantonese and Mandarin, not just by language, but also by in other words, by DNA makeup. And it was beautiful. And so, you know, when you ask yourself, should I go to a foreign country when my kids are still going to school? I went to school all over the world, and I don't regret one fucking thing. It's what made me who I am today. But for our vice president to make those comments, I'm actually going to start crying. With a brown wife and brown kids is really alarming. And Jesus Christ, Yeshua, who turned over the merchants' tables, and you know what my theory is on that one, my download on that one. You can, if you don't know me, if you're just following me, you can check me out on YouTube. I have a whole playlist on Yeshua and Mary Magdalene and the fuckery of the Orthodox teachings. He would have never once judged anyone who was gay, who was browner than him, who was lighter than him, who looked different than him. Never. And he proved it. So I'm not sure what these people are fucking reading. Like when you're reading the New Testament, what the fuck are you reading? What's your takeaway? Seriously, I want to know. What is your takeaway? What are you reading? What's going on in your mind? And these are the Christians. Is this why now we have a sentence, a saying that says there's no love like Christian hate? Or there's no hate like Christian love? I'm trying to be articulate, but my emotions are hugely thick and clogging my throat. So I'm going to actually do something because I need to read something of sense, and that's more articulate than what I'm able to manage. Hang on. And I'm going to read from the book by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and I'm going to ask for divine guidance to open it at any page. It's called The Lost Years of Yeshua, The Lost Years of Jesus by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. I'm just going to open the page. And I'm going to see what they said. Okay? Okay, I'm going to go into... I'm just going to open it wherever. Let me see. Trying to find something that that starts out in a way that isn't. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is Notovich. It's the guy who found some, he actually went to Tibet into, what was it called? I think the temple was Hemis in Tibet. 4 people were able to verify that there was some writings about Yeshua being there. They called him Isa. And so I'm going to give you the names of the people who were there who saw it before I start reading that from the page. Nicholas Notovich discovered the long-lost documents in 1887 in the Hemis Monastery in Ladakh. Swami Abhed Ananda published a Bengali translation of the Hemis manuscript in 1929. I've been looking for that manuscript, can't find it. I'm not shocked. Nicholas Roerich quoted the same verses in a 1929 travel diary of his Asian expedition, and finally in 1939 a beaming Lama at Hemis presented a set of parchments to Elizabeth Kaspari with the words, "These books say your Jesus was here, Tibet." Okay, so we already know that Jesus, aka Yeshua, had traveled to the east, from the Middle East into the deepest parts of the East, into the Himalayas. And I'm going to read to you from Notovich, it looks like. And I'm going to start here, because that's when my eyes fell. The New Testament and throwing light in hereto obscure points. The works known as Apocryphas were so numerous in the 16th century that the Latin Council of Trent was forced to curtail an immense number of them so as to avoid controversies that would have been hurtful to the interests of the public and to reduce the book of Revelation to the minimum accessible to commonplace minds. Had not the Nicene Council with the Emperor Constantine's Constant already prescribed many manuscripts in the hands of the faithful, which were regarded by them with a veneration almost equal to that which they professed for the four canonical Gospels, the Nicene Council, in common with that of Trent, also reduced to a minimum the sum of transcendental truth. So they are editing the holy words of Yeshua, the words of we are one, we are all children, you can be like me, in fact outdo me, you can be better than me, right? And that is what he was teaching. Yes, I can do these things, but you can do them too. He was one of the great teachers. But then the hands of narcissistic sadists, mostly populated by men, and then corroborated and supported by toxic matriarchs, took over. So I'll continue. It is not on record that Stilicho, a general of Honorius, caused the Sibylline books to be publicly burned in the year 401 AD. Can it be denied that these were full to overflowing of moral, historical, and prophetic truths of the highest order? That would be giving the lie to the whole of Roman history, whose most important events were determined by the decision of the Sibylline books. Sibylline books were burned. Wow. So that would be, and let me spell you Sibylline. Sibylline. Thank you, my love, your sweetheart. In the times of which we speak, there was every motive for establishing or supporting a badly consolidated or already tutoring religion, and the spiritual and temporal authorities believed that this could not be done better than by organizing a vigorous watch. Did you hear that? Vigorous watch and an implacable censorship over eternal truths. They had monks that were running and scouring the world to destroy holy scriptures that spoke of things to make us better as human beings, transcendental, to give us the keys, the downloaded codes of ascension, to get us to catapult ourselves into high levels of ascension, collective consciousness, and they fucking made sure those books would never see the light of day. It's a shock that the Dead Sea Scrolls ever made it into the world. But let's not forget, they were buried for 2,000 years. In the times of which we speak, there was every motive for establishing or supporting a badly consolidated or already tutoring religion. Sorry, I just read that. But enlightened minds were so little desirous of rejecting in mass all documents that did not tally with the official measurement, that they themselves rescued a certain numbers from oblivion. In the last 300 years, those editions of the Bible which admit it as an appendix to the book of the Pastor of Saint Hermas, the Epistle of Saint Clement, and that of Saint Barnabas, the Prayer of Manasseh, and the two complementary books of the Maccabees are by no means rare. By the way, the Gospel of Barnabas is supposedly fraud. But who said it was fraud? See, I would say, and they're telling me to say that, follow the money. When they tell you a scripture, a gospel is fraud, follow the money. Who does it benefit financially? And how does it benefit them financially? Which is easy to figure out. The four Gospels form the basis of Christian teaching, but there were 12 apostles. Saint Bartholomew, Saint Thomas, Saint Matthias professed to have preached the glad tidings to the peoples of the Indies, of Tibet, and of China. Have these friends of Jesus, these familiar witnesses of his preaching in his martyrdom, written nothing? They leave to others exclusively the office of transcribing on papyrus the sublime teaching of the Master? But the others wrote in Greek, and the Greek tongue was not heard or understood beyond the Euphrates. How could they have preached in Greek to men who only understood Pali, Sanskrit, or the multiplied Hindustani or Chinese dialect? St. Thomas notably... Okay, hang on. I gotta get something out of my dog's mouth. You know how that goes. I'll be right back. Bloody hell. No, don't do that. You're gonna choke. Okay, good boy. Okay, hang on. Let me continue. Hang on. Sorry. Hang on. Where was I? So, by the way, the person who's writing this, so you're clear, it's Notovich, the guy who first found, records that Yeshua, aka Isa, was in Tibet, okay? So he talks about, how did they communicate? St. Thomas notably had the repute of being the most lettered disciple among his colleagues, who were mostly working men. In default of marble or brass, would not St. Thomas have engraved on imperishable tablets these things which he had seen, those lessons which he had learned from the crucified Lord? The verses which were communicating to me by the Buddhist Lama of the monastery of Himis, Himis, by which I put in their order of sequences so as to give them consecutive sense and render them conformable to the rules of literary composition, may have been actually spoken by St. Thomas. Historical sketches traced by his own hand or under his direction. May not his resurrections of books which have been buried under the dust of secular ages be the starting point of a new science which should be fertile in unforeseen and unimaginable results? These are the questions which are raised by my book. Criticism would do itself honor by examining them seriously. The subject is well worth the trouble. It contains all the problems which agitate humanity. I'm convinced that researchers would not be fruitless. I gave the first blow with the pickaxe and revealed a hidden treasure, but I have reasons for believing that the mine is inexhaustible. So again, remember, this is Nicholas Notovich, who writes this in 1887 or thereabouts, after he found proof that a long lost document found in the Himis monastery in Tibet that showed, and there are three other people beside him who also saw it. So when people debunk, they always use his name. There's another Nicholas Roerich, so you can confuse the two. But these are four different people who saw, two of them, actually, how many of them? One of them translated it into Bengali. I can't find that translation to save my life. The Notovich one is being republished, and you can actually pre-order it on Amazon or eBay. Or I highly recommend you buy it from thrift books or somebody else. Try to give money to the little people. Stop giving money to the machine. But what I will say is that they always debunk Notovich. Constantly. Like he's the only, there's just a guy in 1887 that went to the Himalayas and he saw, no, they're fucking four people. And one translated to Bengali in, again, let me repeat myself, 1929. So I can assure you that this translation got into the hands of the Vatican. May I remind you to go back to Godfather 3. I'll leave it there. Maybe you should revisit that movie. That's all I'll say. It is no longer today as it was in those past centuries when one class of men alone were the depositories of integral truth and dispensed to the masses their share of indivisible property, each one according to his needs. Today the world is eager for knowledge, and everyone has a right to turn a page of the book of science and to know the truth of concerning the man God who belonged to all of us. I believe in the authenticity of the Buddhist narrative because I see nothing that can contradict or invalidate it from a historical or theological point of view. Let it be studied and discussed. Let it even be proved to me that I am wrong. But that is no reason for insulting me. Insults only prove one thing: the impotence of their authors. I have put into practice the words of the prophet Daniel, that in the time will come when many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. I have studied, I have sought, I have learned, I've discovered. I hand over my knowledge and my discovery to those readers who, like myself, are desirous of learning and knowing. I hand them over through your agency to the English public in entire confidence, and I defer beforehand to its verdicts in the full conviction that it will be an equitable one. Yours very truly, N. Notovich. Wow. And just like Nikola Tesla died in disgrace, what does that mean, died in disgrace? Well, you know, he died in fucking utter poverty, and his papers and his studies were confiscated with that, from what I've heard, hours. I will not go into who and how it was confiscated. Again, it is your job to, I don't know, it's a Google away. I hate saying that, but there it is. What happened to this Nikola Tesla shit when he died in a fucking hotel room, alone, broke, skinny, probably starving. You know, that's all I gotta say on that. And why am I bringing that up? Because the 19th century was an age of eradication. How do I know that? Because I studied Martin Bernal, Professor Martin Bernal, who was a Jewish man, white Jewish, whatever that means, and was very interested in his religion, very interested in his people, which is normal. He was a scholar. He was a scholar and a teacher of Chinese Asian studies. And in deciding, let me find out about my roots, my people, right? He wrote Black Athena Volume 1, 2, and 3. He was bastardized. He was demonized. He was hunted down like a dog because he actually talked about the beginnings of the Semitic race as we know it. And he showed in his book, Black Athena Volume 2, that in the 19th century was an absolute catastrophe for us to ever know the truth. Everyone's running around going, Tartarian, Tartarian. It's more than that. It's more. The 19th century did something that we are now waking up to. And the 19th century, many things were happening, as you know. Well, slavery in America was still going on, full blast. Pompeii had been discovered. Egypt had been really discovered. Champollion broke the code of the hieroglyphs. Champollion during the Napoleonic Wars that took Napoleon and his men to Egypt. What else was happening? And then as we walked in with Queen Victoria and her fucking rule of I don't even know why they make movies about that bitch. But anyway, Queen Victoria and her little rule of terror, reign of terror over the Irish, over, you know, what they were doing to the Indians in India and the Africans. And so they were finding information that was actually enlightening them on the human race and race itself and who was what and who was to be respected. I mean, honestly, in my book, being a person who believes in reincarnation, everyone should be respected because we've all embodied the various racial and gender makeup and all of the particulars of every race on this planet, every mixture, every race. At this point, we've done it all. Most of us who are sitting here together. You know what I mean? But anyway, Martin Bernal discovered some things about the beginnings of the Carthaginians and the worship of Baal, B-A-apostrophe-A-L, a.k.a. Moloch, and the rituals that were, by the way, worldwide. Rituals of sacrifice were worldwide. The Irish did it. The Africans did it. Hindus did it. I mean, they all did it. The Romans did it. I mean, it was all over the world, okay? But he was also finding in his studies how they were what they call whitewashing. And this is coming from a YT man, right? Since we have to fucking constantly talk in code. And he was damn near destroyed. And he's dead. I think he died. I was shocked. His last book, Geography of a Life, was the last book I bought of his. And I, personally, as a human being on this planet, in this avatar of multiple bloodlines and DNA, thank him for his work. Because he's putting things right. And there was if you do any research on the Titanic and who was on that ship when it sunk and why it sunk and why those men didn't make it, because they had honor, integrity, and cared about, that was probably one of the last billionaires of that era, were the ones who understood their duty to society, which was you're going to build hospitals, you're going to build schools, you're going to build libraries, and you're going to bring fucking culture into your land. You're going to build museums. The current billionaires here haven't done shit. Don't tell me about Bill Gates. I don't want to hear it. Writing checks to things that they want to curate to. His wife left him, by the way. So hey, there you go. There's the argument. Why'd she leave? I think we know. Okay? So the people who are trying to speak the truth are constantly being ridiculed and witch hunted, and Martin Bernal was one of those men. You can look it up, because the books that were coming after him on what he said was not out of Africa. For example, no Black Athena, shit like that. It was insane. It was absolutely insane, because honestly, who gives a fuck ultimately? But there was an agenda, and he explains the agenda in Black Athena volume. I would go with volume 2, go right there, but try to get all the books, because one day they will be out of print, and right now they're selling for like over $45. They're hard, and you know why people price books like that, right? So you don't have access to them, because it's like you have to for all three. I gotta drop $150. So go on eBay, go on, go to old broken down bookstores and shit like that. You might find copies, and they won't even know what it's worth. Some of these sellers, but I would highly recommend you get that in your library, because many of my friends who are, we're kind of like armchair scholars, like I don't have a fucking PhD. I don't have a master's. This is something I do for myself. I don't do it to impress anyone. And I certainly wouldn't even think of going to college because I'd probably fucking get in trouble and get thrown out of class. That was my life anyway when I was young. I don't see it changing at this age, because I would push against the rhetoric being fucking thrown at me, because I know probably as much or more than some of these people, because I've read as much as some of these people. And that's what I want you to learn, to teach your kids to love knowledge and to study everything, okay, so that they can question and ask the right question. So we're moving into the preface. And I believe it's about when he first moved in and saw the documents. But let me set that up. So preface, since the Turkish War, 1877 to 78, I've made a series of travels in East, after having visited even the least remarkable localities in the peninsulas of the Balkans. I started across the Caucasus in Central Asia and Persia. And by the way, Caucasus Mountain, Caucasian, Caucasus, for many of you, you probably know this, hopefully you do. But Caucasus Mountain, the Caucasian mountain, Cyrus the Great, is the beginning of the Caucasian race as we know it. It actually comes, and so Persians are Caucasian. They're the original Caucasian. So when you look at the various bloodlines and the various green eyes and blue eyes and red hair and blonde hair, you'll see that in parts of what formerly known as Persia. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in because people tend to think, I don't know what they think. they think that brown people and beige people and all look alike, and they don't. Okay, I'm not gonna. They have a lot of different. You can go to the Aboriginals and you'll see blonde hair with brown skin. You can go to Africa. My father told me that he'd been in Africa for a long time in the 1950s, and he told me of a race of Africans, Nubian, dark black skin, gorgeous, with Japanese straight ass, long black hair, straight, born with it. And then he told me of another race that had blonde hair, like literally platinum blonde. So we have to kind of redefine what things look like. There's a particular girl that you would call, she looks Semitic, meaning Arabic, meaning whatever that means, including Hispanic, by the way. And she has to fight people and telling, I do come from Africa. I was born in Africa. I am a fucking 3,000 years bloodline of Africa. There is no other mixture. As I'm in Africa. In this part, this is how my people look like in Africa. And she has to constantly you talk about it. And other people who have this idea of what African people look like they'll say you have African features or you have European features. No, one of the great things that Iman talked about, somebody had said to her, you have European, you look like a white woman dipped in chocolate. She goes, no, actually, I'm pure African. If anything, you have African features. You have my features. Why am I saying all that? Because the way racism ends is when we fucking stop being stupid and ignorant. That's how it ends. As long as we're stupid and ignorant, we're going to think that Persians or Arabs, we're not going to realize that they are the beginnings of the Caucasian race. We're going to think that all Africans can't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And we're seeing people who have dark black skin with very big sapphire blue eyes, and it's natural. And we could go into a lot more, but we're talking about Yeshua, and we're talking about Yeshua's travel into Tibet. Why is that important? Because Yeshua is not a racist. It's like, that's it. You can't be a racist and be a Christ-conscious human being. The energy, the frequency, it clashes. It's evil. Racism is evil. And it's promoting a fractured sense of self, because I've known of people who did DNA tests and found out they had black blood, Asian blood, Native American blood, and it broke them. It broke them. They thought they were, I'm pure Irish, I'm pure Italian. Okay. What does that mean? So Yeshua is walking out. They call it the last years. You know that. Called the lost years. By the age of 12, he's somewhere. No one knows where the fuck he is, supposedly. And yet we know, I hope you know, that they always knew where he went. It just wasn't part of the PR campaign that they had. And the PR campaign of the Vatican Church at the time needed him to be, the lost years, we don't know. We don't know. Like, how did he learn how to be an alchemist? We don't know. It must have been God. And of course it is God. But the alchemy of doing what he did, of healing powers. If you watch Dr. Strangelove, I'm not being funny when I tell you to say that, because sometimes I watch Marvel comic movies turn into movies and I go, what the fuck? Dr. Strangelove is in Tibet. And why am I even bringing that up? Well, because we know that there are people that can go into surgery with absolutely no anesthesia. None. They've shut off pain centers. How do they do that? How do they do that? How are people able to remote view accurately 100%? How are psychics still on the sideline, like on the down low, being hired to help detectives find, criminals? And they have a 90 percentile success rate. How? That's those are the questions an intelligent person would ask. So if everyone in the 3D logical world of science says, it's impossible, it's not logical, but meanwhile, that shit's happening. People with no anesthesia under surgery. People meditating in the fucking snow in a loincloth and not fucking dying of frostbite, exposure, hyperthermia. People remote viewing, psychics. touch healing, breath work to take away negative cells that are like, tumors. I can't say the word, but I'll say the big C. And from just breath work and visualization and laughter are able to eradicate that. How the fuck can you still think in a 3D term? And Yeshua was coming on this planet to show us, you too can do this. This isn't crazy shit. You can do it. That's why I'm telling you, have fun with your kids. Watch Doctor Strange. And then have a conversation as a family. Do you think that's possible to do that, what he did? The way he healed, the way he transmuted, the absolute, what we call impossibility of getting his hands back after this car accident. Is it possible? Why is it possible? What makes us believe it's not possible? How can we transmute this from being impossible to the impossible becoming possible? If we're not teaching that to our kids while we talk about Yeshua, what are we fucking doing, man? What's the point of all this? Just to be on our knees and pray and be in fear? I don't think so. Wandering without any fixed plan from one place to another, I reached as far as mountainous Afghanistan, whence I regained India by the picturesque passes of Bolan and Garne. I then ascended the Hindus as far as Rawalpindi, traveling over the Punjab, the country of the 5 great streams, visited the golden temple of Amritsar and the tomb of the king of Punjabi, Ranjit Singh, near Lahore, and directed my steps towards Kashmir, the valley of eternal happiness. Look up pictures of Kashmir in the 1940s. It looks like fucking heaven. There I recommended my peregrination as curiosity led me until I arrived in Ladakh, whence I had the intention of returning to Russia by way of Karakorum and Chinese Turkestan. One day, in the course of a visit I made to a Buddhist convent on my route, I learned from the chief lama there existed in the archives of Lhasa very ancient records treating on the life of Jesus Christ and the nations of the West, and that certain great monasteries possess copies and translations of the same. As it seemed then very improbable I should ever visit that country, I determined to postpone my return to Europe to a later date and coûte de coûte to find these copies either in the great convents already mentioned or by going to Lhasa. The journey to Lhasa is far from being as dangerous and difficult as we are led to believe. It presented only such perils as I was well accustomed to, which would not have deterred me from attempting it. During my stay in Leh, capital of Ladakh, I visited the great convent Himas, situated in the environs of the town, whose library, I was informed by its chief lama, contained certain copies of the manuscripts in question. Not to awaken the suspicions of the authorities as to the object of my visit to the convent, and to avoid any obstacles that might be raised in my further journeying in Tibet, I being a Russian, I made known my intention of returning to India and at once left the capital of Ladakh. An unfortunate fall from my horse, through which I fractured my leg, furnished me with quite an unexpected excuse for returning to the monastery where first aid was given me. I profited by my short stay among the lamas to obtain the consent of their superior that the manuscript relative to the life of Jesus Christ should be brought to me. Thus, aided by my interpreter, who translated from the Tibetan language, I was enabled to carefully write down in my notebook what the lama read to me. No doubting for one moment the authenticity of his chronicles written with great precision by the Brahmanic and more especially Buddhistic historians of India and Nepal, I determined on my return to Europe to publish a translation of it. With this intent, I addressed myself to several well-known ecclesiastics, begging them to revise my notes and to tell me what they thought of them. Holy shit, he trusted the machine. Major Platon, the celebrated metropolitan of Kiev, formed the opinion that this discovery was of great importance. Nevertheless, he dissuaded me from publishing the memoirs on the pretext that their appearance could only be prejudicial to me. In what way the venerable prelate refused to explain more fully. As our conversation took place in Russia, where the censor would have assuredly put his veto on a work of the kind, I resolved to wait. A year later, see, so it's interesting how everyone has an agenda to suppress truth that could liberate the consciousness of humanity. A year later, finding myself in Rome, I showed my manuscript to a cardinal who is au mieux with the Holy Father. He answered me textually as follows: what would be the good of publishing this? I gotta pause. What would be the good of publishing this? This is from the mouth of a cardinal in the Vatican. No one will attach much importance to us, and you will make yourself a crowd of enemies. However, you are still very young. If it be a question of money which interests you, I might ask that a reward should be made to you for your notes, which should be indemnify you for the expenses you have incurred and the time you have lost. Naturally, I refused. Wow. In Paris, I spoke of my project to Cardinal Rotelli, whose acquaintance I had previously met in Constantinople. He also opposed the publication of my work for the ostensible reason that it would be premature. The church, he added, suffers already too much from the new wave of aesthetical thoughts. You will only give fresh pasture to the detractors and culminators of the evangelical doctrine. I tell you this in the interest of all the Christian churches. Now, let me tell you something. So he's going from cardinal to cardinal. He's going from Russia to Italy to France to Paris. The last person who actually saw it was in 1939. World War II is about to hit, right? Her name is Elizabeth Kaspari, right? She sees it. She's told what it is. And in 1959, Tibet, is taken. And you know by who? Now, what was interesting about when Tibet was taken, just to like tease some, for me to embroider and stitch everything together, what happens in 1959? All the monasteries are sacked. They're sacked. All the scrolls are sacked, burned. All the monks, these great lamas who died in the lotus position, who are wrapped in layers of metals and gold and silver, are destroyed. Most of them are destroyed. But most importantly, the scrolls are destroyed. I don't know if they were able to bury, because they would have known. Because I know the Dalai Lama escaped in 1959 for his very fucking life. He was a teenage boy. So what happened? Did they do what happened with the Dead Sea Scrolls, where the Essenes, the Gnostics, whatever you want to call them, like threw shit in jars, sealed it with wax, and buried them up in the Sinai Mountains in Egypt? Did they do the same in the Himalayas, where they took some of these scrolls, buried them in jars, and hoped to God one day they'll be found? Most likely. Good luck in going up there now. Because I have a friend who actually has gone there. And every move you make, you're watched. Every move you make. So good luck. So, and with the and did the church have anything to do with that little fuckery that happened in 1959? Well, I wouldn't doubt it. I would not doubt it. Because that was a massive human rights violation over fucking, land. But let me continue, because I think this is an interesting conversation, and hopefully, if you're listening to me, hopefully this will survive and you'll be able to watch it on YouTube. To be honest with you, don't be surprised if it doesn't. But we're on a roll, so let's continue. Okay? Let me continue reading. So I'm going to repeat. In Paris, I spoke of my project to Cardinal Rotelli, whose acquaintance I had previously made in Constantinople. He also opposed the publication of my work for the ostensible reason that it would be premature. And I'm going to repeat everything I said, because I really want you to remember what I said. The church, he added, suffers already too much from the new wave of atheistical thought. You will only give fresh pasture to the detractors and calumniators of the evangelistic doctrine. I will tell you in the interest of all the Christian churches. This is 1887. So already in 1887, right, they're having problems. 1888, 1887, they're having problems. The church is having, people are detracting. The Darwinistic theory has come out. We come from monkeys, fuck Adam and Eve, shit like that. But that's not really it. I think he needs to go outside. And that is the problem. So let me continue what he says here. Again, this is from Nicholas Notovich. Then I went to see Master Jules Simon. He found my communication interesting and recommended me to ask M. Renaud advice as to the best means of publishing the memoirs. He can't get it published. Oh, by the way, on a side note, when a lot of books were published in that period of time, and if you know anything about the Bronte sisters or The Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller, you had to pay publishers to pay. You needed like a patron to throw some money towards you or to support your publishing work by publishing it for you. Every blue moon you'd have Jane Austen, and other people like that who would get published for a fucking small stipend, right? And then the book would take off and then they'd start making money, but never to the level that we now understand. But my point is, he can't get his fucking memoir published. Let's continue. The next day I was seated in the study of the great philosopher. Our interview ended in this way. M. Renan proposed that I should entrust him with the memoirs in question. Did you hear that? With the view of his making a report on them to the Academy. This proposition was, as it may be imagined, very alluring and flattering to my amour-propre. Nevertheless, I carried away my work on the pretext of further revising it. Yeah, he was like, what the fuck? Wait, hang on. That's my only copy. You want me to just hand it to you right on the spot? He was getting red flagged, and he was like, nah, you know what? I need to revise it. I'll tell you what, I'll bring it when it's revised. He was feeling, he was listening to his instinct. I foresaw that if I accepted this combination, I should only have the honor of having discovered the chronicle, while the illustrious author of the Vie de Jésus, which means the life of Jesus, would gain all the kudos through commenting about it and making it public. Therefore, as I believed myself sufficiently prepared to publish the translation of the chronicle and to accompany it by my notes, I declined the very kindly meant offer thus made to me. Not, however, to hurt in any way the susceptibility of the great master, who I deeply respected. I determined to await his demise, which sad occurrence I foresaw, judging from his enfeebled condition, could not be far off. The guy was psychic. This prognostication having come true, I hastened to put the notes I now publish in order, reserving to myself the right of affirming the authenticity of these chronicles and developing in my commentaries the arguments which should convince us of the sincerity and good faith of the Buddhist compilers. I suggest, in conclusion, that before criticizing my communication, any learned society can, at relatively small outlay, equip a scientific expedition having for its mission the investigation of these manuscripts on the spot and thus verifying their historic value. It ends with Nicholas Notovich. P.S. During my journey, I took a considerable number of very curious photographs. When on arrival at Bombay, I examined the negatives and found that all had become obliterated. So he took pictures of the manuscript, it looks like. This misfortune was due to the imprudence of my, I'm not going to say it, Philip, to whom I entrusted the box containing the plates. During the journey, finding it heavy, he had carefully removed the contents, thus rendering my exposure to the light, all my labor, useless. I have therefore, in illustrated my book, had recourse to the extreme kindness of my friend M. d'Auvergne, who, having made a journey to the Himalayas, graciously offered me a selection from his photographs. So, the way people talk in that period of time is pretty fucked up. Philip is apparently a black man, and he uses a very derogatory word, just so you know. and I won't say it, obviously. But what I will say is that the lack of evidence in that remain from the 19th century eradication of anything of worthiness from the land of Africa, right? And with the continent of Africa, it's. I don't know why people don't know that, but they talk like they don't know. Africa is a continent, not a. You know what I mean? There are various countries in Africa. I know you guys know that, but for anyone else who's listening, just in case you don't know, it is not. The fact that it's a continent and people think all of Africa is this or that is it's like saying all of Europe is like Poland. It's stupid, okay? But people literally talk like that, which I find alarming, because the average person in this landmass doesn't even know the continents. On the side note, and that's. You can buy a shower curtain on Amazon that has the continents in every country and just hang it on your fucking shower, and your kids will learn where the countries are when they take a shower. I'm not being funny. I've done it since my son was born. Okay? Just on a tip on how to educate your kids without educating your kids, Okay, so let me continue, okay? Journey to Tibet, which I think you'll enjoy. Hopefully you will. During my sojourn in India, I had frequent opportunity of conversing with the Buddhists, and the accounts they gave me about Tibet excited my curiosity to such an extent that I resolved to make a journey into that comparably unknown country. With this object, I chose a route crossing the province of Kashmir, a place I had long intended to visit. I'm telling you, man, look up Kashmir. And look up Kashmir in the 1920s, in the and beyond that, in the 19th century. It's fucking beautiful. The palaces are like lace. Okay? On October 14th, 1887, I took my seat in a train crowded with soldiers and started for Lahore for Rawalpindi, where I arrived next day towards noon. After resting a little and expecting the town from which its permanent garrison has the aspect of a war camp, I purchased such things as seemed necessary for campaign in districts not yet reached by the railway. Assisted by my servant Philip, of Pondicherry, whom I had taken into my service on the warm recommendation of the French consul at Bombay, I packed up my baggage, hired a tonga, which is a two-wheel conveyance drawn by ponies, and having installed myself on the seat behind, set out along the picturesque road which leads to Kashmir. Our tonga made rapid progress over the ground, and though at one time we had to steer with considerable dexterity through a large convoy of soldiers who, with their baggage carried on the backs of camels, formed part of a detachment returning from encampment to the town. We soon passed the valley of the Punjab, and climbing a path with endless windings, entered the zigzags of the Himalayas. Here, the steeps became more and more abrupt, the delightful panorama of the region we had just traversed rolling behind us and becoming engulfed at our feet. The sun had illuminated the mountaintops with its last rays when our tonga gaily left the zigzags we had traced on the crest of the wooded heights, at whose foot nestled Muri, a sanatorium always crowded in summer with the families of English functionaries who go there to seek freshness and shade. Usually the tonga is available from Muri to Snigapar, but at the approach of winter, when all Europeans desert Kashmir, this service is suspended. I undertook my journey precisely at the vein of the season, much to the astonishment of the English I met upon the road returning to India, who tried in vain to guess the object of my doing so. The roadway being at the time of my departure still in course of construction, I hired a saddle horse, not without difficulty, and evening had set in by the time we began our descent from Muri, which stands at an altitude of 5,000 feet. Our journey along a dark road, seamed with ruts by recent rains, was not particularly merry one, our horses having to feel rather than see their way. As night fell, a storm of rain surprised us, while owing to the thick oaks bordering our path, we were plunged into such impenetrable darkness that for fear of losing sight of each other, we were obliged to shout out every now and then. In this profound obscurity, we realized heavy masses of rock almost above our heads, while to the left, hidden by the trees, roared a torrent whose water must have formed a cascade. Fucking dangerous. with no lights. The icy rain had chilled us to the bone, and we had been tramping in the mud for nearly 2 hours when a faint light in the distance revived our energies. Lights in the mountains, however, are but treacherous beacons. They appear to be burning quite close, when in reality they are far away and disappear only to shine forth anew as the road twists and turns, now to the right, now to the left, now above, now below, seeming to take pleasure in deluding the weary traveler for whom the darkness hides the fact that this longed-for goal is really motionless and its distance becoming lessened every second. It's kind of like seeing an oasis, a mirage, and you think you've seen an oasis, and you haven't, in the desert. I had given up all hope for ever reaching the light we had described when it suddenly reappeared, and this time so near to us that our horses stopped on their own accord. Here I must sincerely thank the English for the forethought they had displayed in building on all the roads small bungalows, one-story inns, destined to shelter travelers. It is true one must not expect much comfort in these semi-hotels, but that is a matter of small importance to the weary traveler, who was more than grateful to find a dry, clean room at his disposal. Okay, I'm going to jump. Because this is really his travel. He's actually, and I'm just going to, and it makes sense. You know why he's doing this? Well, I mean, we know why. It's a memoir. But why is it the details that he's giving? The details he's given is that when he was debunked, just so you know, the debunk of Nicholas Notovich, the way they did it was to say he had never been there. That was their first argument. They were that scared. The machine was that scared that he had witnessed and seen that Isa, aka Yeshua, aka Jesus Christ, had lived in Tibet, had studied with the Buddhist monks, had gone through training. Again, let me remind you, the three wise men came from the East: Egypt, India, Tibet. Remember how they were always personified? Brown, black, and beige, or yellow, if you will, right? Do you remember? Okay. And what does that mean? It's funny how they thought by leaving a couple things in truth that we would never get it, we would never figure it out, and yet here we are figuring it out. They're breadcrumbing information. Because in spiritual law, in universal law, you can't fucking lie to that level. You have to give them truth. Give them truth, then you can fuck them over. Then they have free will. I was just talking to a friend of mine who I'm doing her Akashic Records tomorrow. And she was telling me about the Swami, a.k.a. Whatever the hell he is, and he was telling people we have no free will. And she was shocked when I said, oh, he's full of shit. And she said, what do you mean? I go, no, that's an old template. That's an old template. He's regurgitating shit he heard that men talked about 200 years ago. It's the same slop. We've always had free will. Except we were convinced that we were not wise enough to exercise our free will, or that we didn't know enough to exercise our free will, or that we were knowledgeable enough to exercise our free will. And what does free will mean? Knowledge, knowing, manifesting the right path for yourself and for people. Somebody asked the question, if you were back in 2005, what would you do? You know what the answer is? I want to ask you that, actually. If you were back in 2005, what would you do different? What would you do different? I'll go first. I'd buy Bitcoin. I'd become a probably billionaire. I would then tell other people who were down and out, buy Bitcoin. Don't fucking spend it. Sit on it for 10 years. Forget you have it, but yet never forget you have it. Know exactly how to access it when it's time. The time will come. And then what would you do in 2008? Well, I would tell people, whatever you do, make sure that you've turned your money into gold. Make sure you've turned your money into Bitcoin. What would you do with that extra money? Build and build and build. Buy land. Build communities. By 2008, having all kinds of communities. What would you do in 2012? Do you understand? Do you know what the average person said? They would buy Apple stock and some other stock. They would hug their grandmother for the last time, and they would something else, not marry the person they married. What would you do in 2005 to change the world is really the question. And the game of the world, unfortunately, was still money, because in 2005, we were still in that weird template. It was unraveling, but it was still present. And so there was a way to gather as much money, to give, to build communities, to warn, to stop, to reroute. And people were not I was like, I thought, because I didn't read the comments until I commented this plan. And it's a fun game, actually. It's a fun parlor game, like a ice-breaking game after dinner, with your friends, with your family. What would you do? And everyone writes it down. They all read it out loud. Because it shifts consciousness. Why? Because everyone was still playing small, is what I saw. They were still, like, buying stocks. Okay, great. So you got all the IPO. And what do you do with all my money? To change the world? No. So even the poor people, or the people that are middle class, can't seem to step out of giving. So can you see the mentality of billionaires? Your average Joe can't fucking fathom. He can fathom becoming rich, but he can't fathom building communities, giving money, giving warning, giving tips, saying, hey, let's reroute. We already know what happened. We're going all the way back to 2005. What do we do with this opportunity? Here's what we do. We build a new society around the world. No one said that. I swear to God. So now that exercise, and then I saw the comments of your working class, right? You're 99%. And I went, holy shit, these billionaires, they're not doing shit either. They're hoarding. They're hoarding and hoarding and hoarding until they're trillionaires. Free will, and part of the responsibility of free will, is to want to seek other pathways. You're either going to sit on the side of the road and go, there's nothing I can do. Like what these, gurus and these swamis say, there's no such thing as free will. You're at the mercy of God. No, you're not. No, you're fucking not. That's why you have free will. And free will and choices and these little exercises that seem benign are exercise of breaking. It's almost like you're hacking people out of their fucking rigid fear and their greed and their myopic views of what's possible. I find it interesting. So if I were you, just for the hell of it, including your teenage kids and your kids, what would you do if you could go back to 2005? Do it with your boomer parents. Do it with your grandparents. Just do it. Give everyone a pad. Everyone's got a pen. And you got 5 minutes. You're on the clock. Go. Wow. And then discuss. Not to shame, but to readdress and to get people to think in a different way. Because we're talking about right now, this answer was a few hours ago. And all the answers were about what I'm going to do for me. And I'm okay. Didn't I say I'd buy Bitcoin? And then I'd build communities. I'd buy land. I'd fucking be, right? But I bought for me. But then how do I make this money work for the greater good? And this is not virtue signaling. I'm so fucking sick of these terms. Virtue signaling is not it. Virtue signaling, when people are showing you a homeless man, grizzled with a beard, in torn clothes, and they're showing you in camera, how else are they going to fucking show you? The transformation of this man, getting a shower, a shave, a haircut, new clothes, money, a hotel, a meal. Is that virtue signaling? Oh, well, why are you putting the camera on? Well, I mean, if you've got 100,000 people that you can influence on how to help the homeless, I'd say, yeah, film it. So people can viscerally feel that. Film it. With their permission. With, obviously, right? With their permission. But that's what I'm saying, is that when we share our points of views that are completely different, we're not virtue signaling. We're actually resetting a new system of philosophy of what's possible. We have been so downtrodden, so beat down that we don't understand how we should always think of, yes, me, okay, let me take care of me. But then, okay, great, now I have more than enough. Like I am abundant beyond abundance. How do I help change the world for the right reasons? And that's what Yeshua was doing. That's why he was traveling. He was learning from sages and gurus and swamis and alchemists, healers, both men and women. That's why he honored and respected women. And whatever was twisted in the New Testament to even bastardize that truth, there's too much evidence that he revered women. And they revered him. His mother, his relationship with his mother was beautiful. To the point where you have statues all over the world and paintings all over the world of her devotion to her son. He's not treating her like she's a cattle. He's treating her as a respected elder who happens to be a high priestess, as is his beloved Mary Magdalene. All of these things oppress, suppress, hidden. To the point where people are actually wondering, right, if the mother and child, the Madonna and child, is not Mary of Magdalene and his son or daughter. We were raised to think it was Madonna, it was Mother Mary and her and Yeshua. No, people are now flipping the switch and asking, wait, hang on, could it be that this image of the mother and child, which is, by the way, a replicate of Isis and Horus on her lap. If you look up Isis and Horus on her lap, the position exactly the same. But okay, I digress. But that's an interesting hypothesis. Were they telling us under our noses all along that no, that's not Mother Mary. That's Mary of Magdalene holding their child on her lap. And that changes everything. It actually is like a domino effect. That's what's mind-blowing, in my opinion. I'm trying to get my phone to charge, and it doesn't look like it wants to, and I don't know why. Okay, let me continue. And then I have to go, because if this isn't charged, then the phone's going to go dead. So just letting you know. Let me see. What else did he say? Let me see where he finds it. Because now the book I'm reading, I'm just going to tell you again, and you can get it for like, I don't know, something like $6, free shipping. I'm not joking. Again, it's called The Lost Years of Yeshua, of Jesus, by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And it's also, and the discoveries of Notovich, Abi Ananda, Rorik, and Kaspari. Okay? So she basically took their works and their pictures, gorgeous, gorgeous pictures in her book. I mean, she kicked ass putting this book together. It's absolutely gorgeous. And for $6, you cannot, like, I'm blown away. There's some things she says that is, in my opinion, not accurate. And it's because of what I've read since then, since her scholarly work through the Cathars. So when I studied the Cathars, which were a very Gnostic sect in France, in the Languedoc region, that were slaughtered at the behest of the Pope of Rome in the 13th century. I read some of her stuff, and I'm realizing that she's still under the old template, right? She doesn't know certain things, and why would she? No one knows everything. You know, this is why it's good for all of us to share information so we can stitch what's lost and stitch it together. Hang on, okay? So I just came across the chapters where Notovich, I believe it's Notovich, has come across, yeah, it's Notovich. The Life of Saint Isa, here it is. The Best of the Sons of Men. I'm going to start reading that, okay? Chapter 1. And I'm hoping, I'm so frustrated with this phone, you have no idea. Yeah, hang on, okay? Because I don't want to, because once I start reading, I'm not going to pay attention to the thing. Okay. Bear with me. let me see here. Okay, well, I'm going to do my best. If I shut down, don't worry, it wasn't them. Okay, so the life of Saint Isa. So this is what he brought back from the Himalayas, okay? Okay. The earth has trembled and the heavens have wept because of a great crime which has been committed in the land of Israel. For they have tortured and there put to death the great and just Isa, in whom dwelt the soul of the universe, which was incarnate in a simple mortal in order to do good to man and to exterminate their evil thoughts, and in order to bring back man degraded for his sins to a life of peace, love, and happiness, and to recall to him the one and indivisible Creator whose mercy is infinite and without bounds. Hear what the merchants from Israel relate to us on this subject. So it actually breaks down exactly what was actually communicated, and what these four people, respectively. Let me repeat their names, because if you do research, you'll see that Nicholas Notovich was absolutely debunked as far as they're concerned. But then came Swami Abhinanda, who published it in Bengali. I'm repeating myself, in 1929, who saw the manuscript in Hemis, who translated into Bengali, and I can't find any of his work except in Bengali. It's never been translated into English. Why is that? Anyway, moving on. Nicholas Roerich, who quoted the same verses in the 1929 travel diary of his Asian expedition. So he saw it, he translated, he copied it. And then finally, in 1939, Elizabeth Kaspari, with the words, "These books say your Jesus was here," from a beaming Lama. So she's put together everything in this book. And while these books are still available, I would, if I were you, I would fucking get a copy. And let me continue. The people of Israel who dwelt on fertile soil, giving forth 2 crops a year, and who possessed a large flocks, excited by their sins the anger of God, who inflicted upon them a terrible chastisement in taking from them their land, their cattle, and their possessions. Israel was reduced to slavery by the powerful and rich pharaohs who then reigned in Egypt. I'm going to skip around because I really want to get to him. I really don't care about this. I care about when he appears. Because they're talking. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to jump. The divine child to whom was given the name of Isa began from his earliest years to speak of the one and indivisible God, exhorting the souls of those gone astray to repentance and the purification of the sins of which they were culpable. People came from all parts to hear him, and they marveled at the discourses proceeding from his childish mouth. All the Israelites were of one accord in saying that the eternal spirit dwelt in this child. When Isa had retained the age of 13 years, the epoch when an Israelite should take a wife, the house where his parents earned their living by carrying on a modest trade began to be a place of meeting for rich and noble people, desirous of having for a son-in-law the young Isa, already famous for his edifying discourses in the name of the Almighty. I'm going to skip. Okay? In the course of his 14th year, the young Isa, blessed of God, came on this side of Sind and established himself among the Aryas in the land beloved of God. Fame spread the reputation of this marvelous child through the length of northern Sind when he crossed the country of the 5 rivers and the Rajpunata. The devotees of the god Jani prayed him to dwell among them. But he left the earring worshippers of Jan and went to Jagannath in the country of Orissa, where reposed the mortal remains of Vishya Krishna, where the white priests of Brahma made him a joyous welcome. Well, the white priest doesn't mean their color, it means the purity of their souls. They taught him to read and understand the Vedas, to cure by aid of prayer, to teach, to explain the holy scriptures to the people, and to drive out evil spirits from the bodies of men, restoring it to them their sanity. He passed 6 years at Jagannath, at Raja Griha, at Benares, and in the other holy cities. Everyone loved him, for Isa lived in peace with the Vachasnas. I'm trying to pronounce it. I believe it's the of the caste system. It's the warrior caste. There's the Brahmas, the caste system of the warrior class, right? The Brahmins meaning the priesthood, and the purists, and then there's the caste system of the warriors, and then there's two other castes, which honestly right now I can't remember. But the Brahmins and the but the Brahmin and the Shastriyas, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's the Shastriyas. So the Shastriyas are the warrior class. The Brahmins, I was correct, told him that they were forbidden by the great Para Brahma to come near to those whom he had created from his side and his feet, that the Vaishyas were only authorized to hear the readings of the Vedas, and this on festival days only. So I remember this story. So at some point, Yeshua, Isa, is there in India with their caste system saying, you can't treat people like that. He pissed them off, actually. I remember reading this. I just remembered. He pissed them off, and they threw him out. Swear to God. So he was always fucking kicking, doors in, okay? He was a rebel. He said that the Sudras were forbidden not only to assist at the reading of the Vedas, but also for contemplating them, for their condition was to serve in perpetuity as slaves to the Brahmins, the Shastras, and even the Vaishyas. Death only can set them free from their servitude, has said Pada Brahman. Leave them then, and come and worship with us the gods, who will become incensed against thee if thou thus disobey them. But Isa listened not to their discourses, and betook him to the Sudras, preaching against the Brahmins and the Shastras. You see what I'm saying? So this is incredible. So here he is in India, right, with the caste system in place, and hopefully you guys know about this, and he is actually absolutely foot to ass, fuck no, how are you treating these people like that? And you believe in reincarnation, but you actually think that these people are dirty and that they should not have the right to have access to the Vedas? What the fuck's wrong with you? So he was thrown out. I'll leave it there because I think that's important to note. So it's not a surprise that he goes to Palestine, right? Judea, and he puts foot to ass again, meaning, the famous scene of turning over the merchants' tables. And how he angers people. I'm not joking, because he's a pure soul. And going back to my original of what started this live. So when people like VPs of countries and people who are supposedly leaders make any racist comments of separation due to the color of your skin, the language, how you pray, you're already not a Christian. You're already not a devotee to God. You are already sacrilegiously blasphemous. You're not following the words of Jesus, especially if that's your thing. It's interesting. Am I a devotee of Jesus? Yes. Am I a devotee of Krishna? Yes. Do I chant in Sanskrit? Yes. But do I respect the way the editorial systems of these holy books have been handled by men who were greedy, barbarous, emperors, subjugators, who call themselves cardinals, popes that had bastards, who had mistresses on the side? I mean, come on, please stop. No. And so if you really are, you're going to tell me you're Christian, right? If you're Christian, if you're really Christian, I would think you would want to know every single fucking morsel of truth, no matter what it took for you to find. I would think. But most people don't want to know. Clearly. So, hopefully this was an interesting live. I don't know. I'm trying to stumble through. I'm unable to really share with you my full heart right now, because I'm not able to. I feel like I'm in a venue where I have to watch. I'm walking on eggshell. And why? Because anything that you say, as it is, what I've said is, there will be people who are supposedly worshipers of the Bible who will study the scriptures, and I'll say, I'm studying the truth, wherever that is, however I find it. And I will study people like Nicholas Notovich, who actually put his the way they treated that man, the way they laughed at him, the way he was blackballed out of society. And you have to understand, during the period of the 1880s, well, no, any period, 16th century, 17th century, if you did not toe the line, you were actually fucked in society. And that's what happened to Nikola Tesla. He didn't toe the line. That's why he died in absolute poverty. And if you look at a picture of Nikola Tesla as a young man, which they love to promote, look up the picture of him when he's old. There's a picture of a destroyed man who's famished, he's underfed, he's lonely, he's afraid of women, and he's afraid of women. And he's completely destroyed. He's a shell of a man. Why would any society do that to any other human being by design? Should be your question. So I'm going to leave you the exercise. If you could go back to 2005, what would you do? You've got 20 years to change everything. What would you do? I think it's a brilliant exercise. Sending you much love on your journey. Follow me on YouTube, Sacred Intimacy Tarot. I'll have this whole live on YouTube within probably a couple hours. Much love. Namaste.